Hello, everybody. I'm Scott Tablin. I'm with Strategic Sales Solutions, and welcome to the Executive's Edge.
Welcome to the Executive's Edge podcast. Discover what gives today's most successful executives their unique edge and propel your business to new heights.
With me, I've got John Bernatovicz. He is the CEO of Willery, and that's in Akron, Ohio, and they support HR and Payroll, the whole community there. And I also have Dave Feidner. He's a certified EOS implementer, and EOS being the entrepreneurial operating system. And we are all going to talk about cultural transformation. And if I may just start it off, and Dave, why is transforming culture important in a small and medium-sized business?
So you asked me this question first, and you're going to get an answer that might surprise you. But for the most part, Scott, I find that what people call cultural transformation is actually cultural rejuvenation. And that part is important because often what has occurred in an organization is that there was a wonderful culture based upon some behaviors that actually were virtuous behaviors. And it's gotten a bit ambiguous because the organization has tolerated behaviors that were outside of those boundaries. So the thing that often people call cultural transformation is actually removing some of those behaviors that are not consistent with the behaviors that were there at the very beginning.
Okay, great. That's awesome. And John, why is it important for the leadership of a business to really keep an eye on culture and how culture is forming within their own organization?
Well, the primary reason for that, and thank you, Scott, for having me, and Dave, enjoy the chance to have this conversation. To me, the primary reason for it is that as a CEO, it makes your job exponentially easier when you have a culture that is productive and it's healthy, and you have alignment within your leadership group and your shareholders and your stakeholders. I think to echo off of Dave's sentiment about reinvigorating, rejuvenation versus transformation, what I found with the clients that I work with is primarily they have a lack of clarity and a lack of alignment. And the simplest place for me to look every single time is whoever is at the top of the org chart. And more often than not, if that person is not willing to go through either a transformation or rejuvenation or whatever word we want to use and accepts the culture for what it is, or worst case, they blame others for why the culture is the way that it is, then you know what your issue is. So for all you CEOs that are out there listening to this show, if you have a culture issue, I would highly recommend that you stop listening to this podcast. You look in the mirror and figure out what is the reason why that's happening. And my best guess is it's you. And I don't mean to point my finger at you because I don't know who you are, because I'm on a podcast right now. But anytime I look at this like coach speak, and I'll end with this on this particular topic, is if you hear really high level coaches that are successful in professional or college or even high school athletics, when their team wins, they deflect all the great recognition to their players. And when they lose, they take all the responsibility for the loss. And I don't know if you recently saw this in some of the March Madness. I saw some very high profile coaches blaming their players for the fact that they lost in the first round. And I found it fascinating that that was what their culture is. And at the end of the day, if you own a business, everything that goes on inside of it is your responsibility, and most importantly, the culture.
Yep, John.
Man, do I love that answer.
Yeah, good answer.
Can I add on to that?
Absolutely. Add on, Dave.
So this is the beautiful thing, in particular, it struck me at the beginning of what John was saying. In any organization, you cannot predict all the stuff that people are going to have to deal with. There's going to be uncertainty. There's going to be issues that come up, and people have to make decisions not knowing what to do. When that culture is strong, I'm going to use John for an example. If he's the CEO of the company, what those people are doing is what John would do if he was in that situation.
That's right. Exactly.
And they know what John would do because the culture is that strong. People understand the behaviors that are the virtuous behaviors of the organization, and they emanate from John and the leadership team.
Exactly.
And that goes back, Dave, to what I mentioned earlier. That's why it makes the CEO's job so much easier, is that they don't have to be there to do that. To me, the optimal point as a CEO of a company or a founder is that my business doesn't need me to be a part of the business. What a beautiful thing to be a benefactor of a great founder.
You
And
bet.
as a CEO, you ultimately want to put yourself out of work and sit on the sidelines doing whatever it is that you need to be doing while your employees, your leadership team, and everyone else runs your business that hopefully does good in the community, treats people right,
Absolutely,
and burns
John.
off or
And
creates
many
cash flow
years
for
ago,
you
I've
and your
heard
family.
speed of the team, speed of the leader. And sure, I work with a lot of small to medium-sized
Yeah, no, I
businesses.
think it's very true.
And sorry,
No, I think that's very true, Scott. I think it's one of those things that you just, again, you can't look any further than your CEO. I just was on a call with a marketing consultant of mine and was talking about a client of theirs that has a very bad culture. And if I needed a test case for a really horrible culture, and I said, what I really would like to do is have a conversation with the CEO and make sure that they realize the impact that they're having on people and their lives. And people hopefully care a lot about their work. We maybe blame people for not caring about their work as much as they used to, and that maybe makes us a little bit old school. But if your people aren't caring about the work that they're doing inside of your organization, don't blame them for it. Look at yourself as a CEO, look at the processes, look at the structure of your business. As soon as you start blaming other people, you all of a sudden aren't getting to the root cause of the issue.
so a question for both of you.
Beautiful.
You're trying to implement change, forming a good culture within your own organizations. How do you deal with resistance to change from the employees that don't really want to hop on the bus?
What to do when the employees don't want to hop on the bus? Is that the question?
Kind of blipped out here. Um, as a owner and a EOS implementer, and you're trying to bring change into an organization, how do you handle the people that are resistant to change?
Well, we refer to those as people issues, and you have to address them. And normally, what you have is a set of core values that represent the definition of what that culture is, what those behaviors look like. And so that you can actually see them in action every day, and you can recognize and reward on the basis of them. So the individuals who are not going to be on board are going to be individuals who do not consistently exhibit those behaviors, and that's a conversation that you need to have with them. When
Yeah,
you
on top of that,
create clarity around those behaviors, it simplifies things for people. And there's nothing wrong with the people who are not on board. It's just they subscribe to a different set of behaviors, and often the behaviors that they have are the same behaviors that they have outside of work. And if you're trying to get them to behave a different way when they're a business in the business environment, that's going to put a lot of stress on them.
I love that word you use, Dave. Simple. Simple is clear. Simple is memorable. And it's one of those key words. And as a business owner, that you want to make things as simple as you possibly can. I think one of the really cool things about a world-class culture, one that's healthy and aligned and clear, is that you're spending far more time recognizing people for living by your culture than you are firing people that don't fit your culture. And I think it's if you have the right culture inside your organization, it's organic throughout the entire process, from a marketing perspective, how you treat customers, when you're attracting new talent inside of your business, when you're interviewing them. And I think if you have a consistent methodology to recognize people for when they're doing their culture at a high level, we within our firm on a consistent basis every single week recognize people when they are living by what we call the Willery Way, which are our 5 core values. And we give them a chance to recognize other team members, and we socialize that recognition on a weekly town hall meeting that we have inside of our firm. I think the worst case scenario in all that is that you don't have clarity around what your culture is, how you define those values, as Dave said, and then you don't deal with issues that exist inside of your business. You just sweep it under the rug and assume it might just go away. And unfortunately, it's not going away. It's just building up exponentially. I think of it as I thought of what was underneath my bed as a 7-year-old kid when I was scared out of my mind when I went to sleep, that there's some monster underneath there. Well, I think you're building a monster inside of your business if you don't deal with cultural issues and you don't address employee issues head on.
Oh,
Exactly.
yes. I've seen some monsters.
And there's this saying in business, as we all know, you coach them up or coach them out. I would tell you that if you have a continued issue with an employee, you need to address it, like Dave said, and you need to put care and concern around that individual and get to know what's really going on. They may be ill. They may be dealing with something really bad at home. They may not like their job. They may be in the wrong seat on the bus, so to speak. And I think the more that you attack those issues, and I think a lot of people don't run toward conflict and they avoid it to the best of their ability. So as a result, cultures can turn into, as we've used, a set of bad monsters underneath my 7-year-old mindset of what my bed looked like. And I was just scared to hell at some point to go to bed, which was a really bad spot. And finally, my mom had me deal with the monsters. We looked underneath the bed. There was no one there. There were some dust bunnies for sure underneath there. So we had some fun in cleaning up my bed. I remember that vividly, but you got to deal with it. You got to deal with it.
It's a great,
Face the issues.
it's a great
important, yeah.
analogy.
Exactly.
So, Dave, how do you ensure alignment between cultural values and business objectives?
So the business objectives are achieved through the cultural values because you're talking about a group of individuals whose behaviors have this set of virtuous stuff. They know how to show up in certain circumstances. When this happens, this is the way I'm going to behave. And that is irrespective of what the business objectives are. The business objectives are achieved through those behaviors.
Got it.
I think they're one and the same, Scott, to Dave's point. I think they're A and B. They're your right hand, left hand in that regard. You can't have one without the other. And I think there should be, again, alignment to those business objectives, to the core values you have, and the team members that you have in your business that are going to try to achieve those. If you don't have alignment around all those things, you're not really being strategic, in my perspective. And I think sometimes that's hard. What does strategic mean? I've had that conversation with a lot of people a lot of different times. And I know in the EOS model, there's a way to develop strategy and there's a process for all that. I try to simplify it as much as I can that says, what issues do I have in my business? What opportunities do I have that I need to leverage? So what issues do I need to attack? What opportunities do I need to leverage? And how are we differentiating ourselves from our competition? And how do we want people to feel when they interact with our business, our employees, our customers, our suppliers, our vendors, friends of the family, so to speak? And to me, getting synergy around that can really create that harmony that an orchestra is looking for when you've got all types of different people playing all types of instruments. And when it's done the right way, it sounds beautiful. When it's done the wrong way, oh my gosh, how quickly can we get out of that orchestra pit to not hear that ugly, terrible music?
And John, I have encountered quite often when I walk into small businesses where the quotas for salespeople or their objectives are too high, they're unattainable. They should be aggressive yet attainable. And when they're not attainable, that just puts a real bad shadow over the people who know they can't make the money because they're not hitting the levels that management thinks they should. Then that's what causes a lot of turnover. And really what you need to do is just develop the compensation plans and the objectives for the salespeople to be aggressive yet attainable. And if it's a new compensation plan, visit it every quarter and just make sure one party or the other is not being taken advantage of. And bring that up front as a salesperson signing the compensation plan, that we will review it. It could go either way. So just there can be a big impact on culture if the objectives are just way out of line.
Do you want to do a little riff on that specific example you just used?
Yeah. What do you mean by riff?
Right. So, for example, a compensation scheme and quotas for salespeople in an organization that have been set too high, where they're unobtainable. Which core value is either being supported or being violated by that decision to set that compensation scheme and those quotas in place?
Yeah.
That's a good question to ask when that condition exists, because often it's just a mistake.
Mhm.
You've taken your best shot at it
Yep.
and it's not working for whatever reason. How do we resolve that issue? Your
Yeah.
core values actually guide you in determining how you resolve that.
Yeah. And it's just, in my opinion, it's just having empathy for everybody and understanding. Now, a lot of times these things are not intentional, that the objectives are too high, because you could be launching a brand new vertical. It could be a startup, and you really don't have the history of data to really show you what seasonality is. It's like a good educated guess. But that maybe that does violate a cultural norm in the first place. Is if you left it in place, that would be a problem if it's not revisited. But when it is revisited, the salesperson, the owner, and general manager, whoever, is going to really show that they care for their employees and they want them to make money. And changing it would make all the difference in the world. I think that's just showing empathy and understanding that these guys are driven by certain behaviors, and if you incent those behaviors in a compensation plan, you could be very successful and both parties win.
Yeah,
Well, let's
I'll go
use the
one step.
example. I'm sorry,
No,
just
go
to
ahead, Dave.
finish on that, where you've made a mistake. Okay. This is a powerful way to reinforce the core values and the culture in the organization is when a leader makes a decision and that decision turns out to be wrong and they own it.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, the impact is tremendous. It goes back to that coach speak when you lose the game, Super Bowl or whatever it is, the high school regional finals, and the coach says that's on me.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they're doing that, and I hope
That-
they truly believe it. I hope it's just not coach speak and they're just not saying it.
Right.
I will go one step further, maybe getting into the part of the business that people don't like to talk about is profitability and top line revenue and those aspects. I just look at sales quota in your example, Scott, of one that says if you're launching a new product, as you gave an example of, a lot of times business owners will put in additional expenses that then they have to recoup based upon top line revenue
Right.
or reduction of of your
Yeah.
cost of goods sold, so you get the right gross profitability inside of your company.
Yeah.
And I think all too often organizations are thinking about that now, mid-March, April, May, and not really looking at it in November and October in proper planning, even preferably in the summer. The summer of this year, we should be looking at 2025.
Right.
And how are our expenses going to come out? Because at the end of the day, that's how quotas, in my opinion, are set.
Mhm.
We have these set number of expenses. We have this gross margin calculation that gets us a number. We then have to create this level of revenue, and they fictitiously come up with that number and say, oh, I think Scott, you can sell 1 million, and Dave, you can sell 1.2, and John, you're going to sell 800,000. That's how we're going to make this work, as opposed to really evaluating your talent,
Right.
understanding what they're capable of, realizing that if you're launching a new product, there's going to be a lot of nuance to that, a lot of skin knees and experiences that maybe don't go exactly as you start that off. And I think we just fictitiously put our finger in the air and hope that we got it right versus really thoroughly evaluating what our expenses are that are fixed and how capable is our team to produce the level of results that we need. And then last but not least, if collaboration or alignment or caring are part of your core values or some flavor of that, why not talk to the salesperson before the new year starts and ask them to build a business plan
Yes.
around what's your level of productivity you think you can produce this year?
Mhm.
And how are you going to go about doing that? And what are the specific tactics you're going to take? And if you had to set your own quota, what would it be?
Yeah.
And have that dialogue, as opposed to, in a lot of cases, this top-down management that happens, and I set the quota for the business and you have to hit it, salesperson.
Right.
Yeah.
To me, that's not the kind of culture, new age culture, that I think a lot of employees are looking for, quite frankly.
That is the right attitude, John. You got any openings, by the way? I mean, it sounds like you got a
Yeah,
you got a great
I got
got a
sales
great
openings. Yeah,
culture going.
we're trying to scale top
Into-
end, but yeah, that's where a lot of our
Yeah,
expenses
no,
are. I, as the owner, have to take some concessions as we reinvest in the
Yeah.
business. And we've modeled all that out, quite frankly. And I'm blessed to have a leadership team that cares as much, even maybe more, about the profitability of the business, because they're educated on it. They understand it. They know the good and bad of a healthy P&L
Okay.
and a well-balanced balance sheet. And that part is profoundly important.
Yeah. Absolutely. And John, you bring up the gross margin and expenses. I have seen some business owners that will throw a lot of different expenses at reducing their revenue to get to margin, but expenses that are out of control that the salespeople have no influence over. That can be a real deal breaker when it comes to culture too, because there may be a variable expense that goes up and down, and they may make less money for selling the same amount of revenue just based off of that expense. So it's really important to consider that, as you said, as you evaluate expenses. And when we talk to the employees at the end of the year, I do the same thing. Before I was doing what I'm doing now, working in bigger corporations, I do a top down and a bottoms up. And it's always interesting, the bottoms up coming from the salespeople, like, what do you need to survive? What do you think you can do? It always comes, and I can't make it a certain 100%, but it usually comes across much higher than the actual quota that is coming from top down. And then you work with them to try to hit those objectives. Don't have two objectives, but just make sure that that somewhere in there there's alignment and a lot of input from the salespeople. Dave, do you are you, as you're going into your businesses, do you talk compensation much? And would you believe that it does affect some of the core values of companies?
So compensation of employees definitely comes up as an issue.
Mhm.
Uh, it is a reflection of the core values, what level of compensation you have. And generally, if you are in a environment where there is a perception, real or imagined, that the compensation is unfair, that is going to get in the way of whatever it is that you're trying to create in terms of a culture.
Mhm. Got it.
And I
Mm.
think, frankly, on that note, that the market will dictate how good or bad your comp plan is. Quite frankly, if it's unfair and unattainable and heavily set on quotas that are defined by maybe CEOs who are overspending frivolously or having variable costs that you can't control and don't have the discipline to run their business from a positive cash flow perspective, then all of a sudden those salespeople are going to quit. And then the market, when they go to try to find new ones, and they're going to ask educated questions, I hope, about the comp plan, and they're going to realize it's generally unrealistic for me to hit it. Guess what's going to happen?
Yeah,
CEO is going to be stuck with no sales team,
you got it.
and your comp plan is going to get exposed, and people are going to quit and not be a part of your organization. I think it's part and parcel. It's all integrated to one another, and I think the culture, the topic that we're discussing, is you mentioned the word empathy. I talk about the word collaboration and alignment a lot.
Right.
Are we aligned on what your quota is for this year? And are we aligned on what you believe you need to do and how I can support you as a CEO, or how our director of sales can support you to obtain your goal? And if we get that level of alignment early on, I think you avoid a lot of issues, because when they're not doing the things that they committed to, it's easier to have that crucial conversation or create accountability to them, as opposed to, I know as a CEO, I set your quota too high and you're not producing at the level that I think you should. And the reason why is you're not making 100 cold calls a day. You're only making 50.
Right.
In order to hit your quota, you got to make 100 cold calls a day. And you just can't, it can't be fictitious. It can't be made up. It can't be done in a non-collaborative way. It top down can happen, but I think groundswell and collaboration and hearing from your customer, in this case, your employees, on what's realistic, that's part of a culture that allows you as a CEO to have an easier job. And that easier
So
job is
John, do
really
you have any
based upon a
measures
lot of
in
upfront
the
work.
organization that you can think of that are affected by core values and cultural rollout. If like right now we've been talking compensation plans and how that affects, but is there any other key measure that you can see that might be affected by a bad culture or just core values in general?
I'll give you a few. Turnover is a huge one. If your
Yes,
turnover rate and ratio is way out of whack
spot
compared to
on.
what your industry
You
is,
bet.
that's a major indication of your culture being off. If you're also your time to fill is kind of a dirty metric in the HR space. I study
Yeah,
this stuff all the time. I've been in the staffing business for 20 plus years. Time to fill is kind of a dirty word, but are you having a really difficult time attracting talent inside of your business? Is it not going as expected? And the other key part of that, in my opinion, that's really critical is how much are you investing in your people?
right.
Are you investing in your leaders and your leadership team and your management team? Are you investing in your supervisors or your frontline workers to help them become better at their job and create opportunities for them that they can get inside of your business? That's the investment in employee
Right.
development and whatnot. If you look at those are just a few that are, at least in my opinion, great indications of how healthy a culture is.
Right.
There's a number of others, but we only have a finite amount of time on the show, and I'm sure Dave has a couple other thoughts
Well,
on all
turnover is a
that.
big one.
Well, yeah.
And here's the thing, and then we're talking about culture. Employment in organizations, sort of the basis of employment is convenience. People work in an organization in many cases because it's convenient to work there. They get paid a certain amount of money, it fits their lifestyle. They get to go home and have a nice weekend. There's a level of security. The problem with convenience-based employment is it does not take much of an improvement in convenience for people to leave. Where it is what keeps people working in your organization is a powerful culture, because what you're doing is you're creating meaning for people in their lives. The work actually creates meaning for them. And that is a powerful thing. That's going to keep people employed with your organization. And they are not going to leave for an improvement in convenience when what they're giving up is getting meaning in their life through their work.
Well said, Mr. Feidner.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah. So
Give an amen to that, Dave. I'm all about that. And one of the cool things, I wrote a book that got launched last year, and it's called HR Like a Boss. I'm blessed that it was published by SHRM Books, the
Nice.
largest HR association in the world. And the number one thing I pulled out of writing 70 some thousand words, well, I actually wrote 100,000 words, and 30,000 of them were just god awful and couldn't put them in a book. That was one of the benefits of writing a book. I realized how many bad ideas I actually had. But one of the ideas that stuck with me was purpose. And I'm hoping my next book is called Purpose, because I look at purpose to a business like location to real estate. It is the most important thing that you have inside of your company, a clearly defined purpose. I encourage it to be 4 words or less. It's your organization's aspirational why. You'll never achieve it. And it's something that you're looking to try to do better, to better your community. And the reason it came up to me is as I was writing my book, I saw a number of very high profile CEOs, Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett, spending the majority of the latter half of their professional career giving away all the money that they earned in the first half of their career. And I think about what would the impact be on the world right now if Bill Gates had cared about the purpose he's aligned with right now when he first started Microsoft, as opposed to 25 to 30 years later. My guess is, I know vaccinations in third world countries are a major hotbed for him. My guess is that issue in the world may be solved at this time. And I have this funny bit that I share, and maybe Dave, no offense, I feel like I'm offending CEOs on this podcast, and I am one, so I guess I can do that. But most CEOs are unemployable. They don't want to work for someone else. They don't want to work in a traditional job. They don't want to have a boss. That becomes a challenge. And number two, they can be selfish people, and they're highly motivated by money. They want to make money, and I want to do it my way. And it's interesting to see the ones that end up having success and having that epiphany at some point, maybe halfway through their professional career, that I was wrong. And that the reason why I started my business and where I'm at today is that I want to do good in the world. And business is my platform to do that.
Right.
And I think a lot of CEOs maybe get so focused on bottom line results, which, don't get me wrong, that is important.
Sure.
But if we looked at the greater good, the bigger picture, and how you as a business owner can impact your community and attack social issues that exist, how you can make your employees feel at work. Imagine if you were an employer that your people wanted to come to work.
Yeah.
And they enjoyed the work they did, and it brought meaning to them, as David said. Think about how much easier it would be to recruit people into your business.
Right.
And I think all too often we're just too outcomes based. We're too worried about what the bottom line is going to be, as opposed to looking at the systemic issues that are causing that profit and loss statement to either yield the result it does or it's not, and really carefully examining it. And to me, I love Maya Angelou's quote: "It's not about what you say, it's not about what you do, it's about how you make people feel." And I try to live my life like that every single day, at work, at home, when I'm playing golf, when I'm out with buddies, or I'm teaching my kids tennis, which I'm terrible at. But that's really important to me, that purpose inside of a business. It's paramount.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
John, you've said a CEO needs to look in the mirror when it comes to culture, because it really is established at the top. I said speed of the team, speed of the leader. Dave, how do you handle when you go into a small or medium-sized business when it's truly obvious that the leader of the company is setting a bad precedent, they've got bad culture, and it all starts with him or her? How do you deal with that? How do you tell a CEO their baby's ugly, Dave?
So you're speaking something I have recently had to deal with exactly
Ah,
this issue.
okay, it's good. Love
And
to
in the
hear it.
case of that particular leader, I went in and I sat down with him and I looked him in the eye. And I told him exactly that. But I also spoke from my own personal experience, because what I saw him doing was something that I had done myself. And I had suffered the consequences. So I spoke from experience with him. Now,
That's great.
as it turned out, he didn't change his behavior, and I'm no longer working with him. But that was a very, very recent experience.
Here's the way my guess is, Dave, for you, I don't know the exact situation, but unless that client changed, my assumption is you probably didn't want to work with them. The core values you have inside of your business are one that say, if they're going to mistreat employees, if they're going to not align to the EOS model that you have, and the structure and discipline that's there, and they're unwilling to do it, even though they're willing to pay you a lot of money, I'm guessing your core value was you had to have that conversation, because it was part of your decision-making process if you're going to continue to serve that client. Is that true, or is that how you felt?
So the companies that I work with tend to be purpose-driven and ambitious. So when you lose sight of the purpose, when you can no longer see it and feel it, and you have, as we had in this particular instance, a clear set of core values, but they were being violated every single day by the person at the top, what the culture was defaulting to was one of cynicism. And it just started to feel very icky. You lose sight of what the good is that was actually there, because this other stuff is going on, and turnover was becoming rampant. So you can't you have to be able to walk the talk, and the leader at the top has to be a strong parent for the organization. They have to have that set of core values. They have to repeat them often, using rituals. And then the most important thing is they have to walk the talk, and they have to be willing to own it when they don't.
Yeah,
Exactly.
willing and able, important management skills. I think I'll just add to what Dave shared on that. You asked the question of, how do you have that conversation when the CEO is the core issue with a bad culture, or, air quote in your terms, their baby's ugly? And to me, I think in Dave's case, having empathy, having been there and done that,
Yeah, good.
hopefully put him in a better position to have the
Do
discussion.
that.
To me, ultimately, I want to get to the root cause of what's causing that CEO to act that way. And more often than not, a lot of CEOs don't want to deal with that. It may have to do with their parents, may have to do with their upbringing, may have to do with a bad boss they had at one point, and they have suppressed that so far down that they don't want to deal with that, and they quite frankly don't know how to act any different than the way that they're acting. And I don't know, Dave, maybe you feel like at times you're as much a psychologist as you are an EOS a coach. And I think if you don't get at the root cause issues, which really have probably very little to do with work and the skill set that a person has as a CEO, it just has to do with the issues that exist. For you to perpetuate that for an incredibly long time, there's got to be something a little bit off, in my opinion. And if you're not willing to address those things, then you're making other people's lives miserable, which is one of the main reasons why I wrote my book. Is this data point that's out there that Gartner puts every single year that shows employee engagement hovering between 33 to 31%. And it'll change by 1 point. Gartner will make this big deal. I keep saying to myself, still 70% of people are not engaged at work, which means that they don't feel invested in their job, and they're not willing to do certain things. And you couple that with the fact that there was another survey that came out that Gartner said that 3 out of 4 people say that my employer doesn't care about my well-being. You want to know why people don't like going to work? They don't feel engaged there. They don't feel their employer cares about them, and it's a terrible recipe, in my opinion. And it has to change. And if I know you started off this conversation, Scott, with this idea of cultural transformation, is it rejuvenation? Is it a reinvigoration? To me, it needs to be disrupted. However, it needs to be disrupted, and every organization can improve in some form of fashion. Just the ones that are the worst are the ones that we're talking about right now, and are the ripest for that kind of change.
Well said.
One thing that I've seen with leaders, and you have to give them a bit of space on this. It is very, very difficult for them to be truly objective about what's going on in their own organization. There's a famous Kurt Gödel quote, mathematician, philosopher from the early 20th century, that you can't be both part of a system and understand it at the same time. So the job of an outsider like John or myself coming into an organization is to help shine the spotlight of attention on that thing that they cannot see because they're part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, question, John. You mentioned your book earlier. Could you repeat the title and just a little background on it? Because I would very much like to take a look at it based off of the conversation we have. Sounds like you really have embraced culture. You got a good running company. What's your book called again?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. It's called HR Like a Boss, and it's described as your guide to amazingly awesome HR. I'll go to one key point of it. Chapter 14, I call it the money chapter. And I've studied EOS, I've studied scaling up, I studied a bunch of different business operating systems. And I was told when I wrote my book that HR professionals, which is really who it's written for, but also business leaders that are trying to connect their people to the purpose of their business, which is really my definition of HR. It's the money chapter 14 is treating your job or your department like your own business. Right. The 2 tenets of doing something like a boss, HR in this case, you got to love what you do. You got to take ownership, which aligns really well to what we talked about earlier. But inside of that business plan, I have 5 main tenets. You have to have a purposeful commitment. You got to be people-centric. You have to produce on a consistent basis. You have to have process continuity, and you have to understand the profitable characteristics of your organization. And when I say you, every employee has to understand the profitable characteristics. And we've build a how-to from beginning to end on how to make sure that you can transform your business in a powerful way, and use the power of human resources and leveraging people and their talents, as opposed to looking at it like a bane of your existence, which if you talk to CEOs, if they have their number one complaint, more times than not, it's their employees. And I'd love to find a way to change that one CEO and one business at a time.
Great. I appreciate that. I will definitely look into that. HR like a boss. Appreciate it. Dave, Gino Wickman, EOS in general, has come out with a lot of wonderful books. Started with Traction. I mean, they're all very effective. I have read them all. In your opinion, what has most impact on like culture? And I know all of them do address culture, but what are your thoughts on the books themselves? The one that really stands out the most for you? Probably a loaded question. Sorry.
Well, each of the books
Yeah.
was for a different
Yeah.
purpose.
Right.
And so it was interesting because I was with Gino on Tuesday. Incidentally, I'll do my plug. He launched this book on Tuesday in Birmingham, Shine.
Okay.
And so the books actually cover the whole spectrum of the journey of entrepreneurism.
Oh, okay.
And the most popular, the one that's sold the most, is obviously Traction, because Traction is the operating system for the company. But the other books are other aspects of that journey. Entrepreneurial Leap is for the individuals considering being an entrepreneur. Rocket Fuel is the visionary integrator dynamic.
Right.
And then you have Traction, but then you also have How to Be a Great Boss. And then later on, you have EOS Life, which is literally about living your ideal life. And now you have Shine,
Okay.
which is a whole different level of being. So each of the books is designed for a completely different purpose.
Yeah. And I'm not as familiar with Shine. Is that out and published now, or will that be available soon?
Officially released yesterday,
okay.
actually. So we did the event in Birmingham on Tuesday, did a workshop. So it's Gino with Rob Dubay, his co-author.
Right.
We did a workshop with about 70 people on Tuesday. It was a wonderful event.
Nice. And Dave, I did think of the EOS Life book when John mentioned the job of a CEO should be to, delegate work themselves, basically out of a job an hour and let the company run efficiently. And that's exactly what the book is. Just set up the organization so you can live the EOS life. That's a good correlation there.
Yeah, so the person at the top has to start living it first, because if they don't, they're holding up everybody else from living it, and they're modeling a behavior that the rest of the organization is going to model.
Right, exactly. Well, guys, I know we're about ready to wrap it up. We're coming very close to the end of our time. Any parting words on what you guys are taking, maybe like best practices, or just in general, any parting words on cultural transformation?
Other than implementing EOS in your business?
Yeah, there you go. That's a very good one. That is.
And hiring Dave, if you do, is that the next thing I'm supposed to say?
In that order?
Yes. I'd give two things real quick, other than obviously leveraging a system and hiring a consultant like Dave to do it. And I think you gave a great perspective of sometimes you're too close to the business to see the challenges or issues that exist, and more often than not, those are right at the center of it, you as the CEO. But I'll go back to that point I made earlier. I think all too often and I know EOS has a great job of, I think it's IDS you call it, if you have issues inside of your business, there's a whole process to attacking and reviewing those, and I think that is important. But I think all too often we don't take advantage of the unique opportunities that exist inside of a business, that's the strengths that we have, and how do we amplify and lever those more. I think the squeaky wheel gets the oil. It's kind of that classic, if you go to a restaurant you hate and get bad service, you'll tell 4 times as many people as you will a restaurant that you like and you love the owner. And I think just that negative viewpoint of it, I would encourage you to flip it around, not by saying in some form or fashion you shouldn't address your issues, but give equality to them, meaning attack the issues, amplify the opportunities and the strengths.
Yes.
That's a key part of it. And the last thing I'll say is look yourself in the mirror. If you have an issue in your business or you have an opportunity you're not levering, my guess is it has to do with the CEO.
Appreciate that. Dave, any parting words, sir?
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I really appreciated having this conversation with both of you, Scott and John.
It's a great conversation. I love the topic, and actually I learned a lot.